Okay, this is the 2025 Toronto Grand Prix men's 100 meter freestyle Heat 1. We are looking at Andrew Herman in lane 2, Liam Weaver in lane 3. In lane 6, we've got Ben Winterborn. In lane 7, we have Albert Bouley, and in lane 8, we've got Misha. All right, let's watch the race and we'll get into it. Okay, coming right back to the start. Let's begin with Andrew. Okay, looking like a pretty good position on the blocks, maybe a bit narrow, and I'm not talking about the arms. Like, I don't really care where your arms are on the block, but and it's not the perfect angle, so who knows. But looks like your back foot is pretty in line. It's obviously on the bit of the outstep, but it looks a bit in line with that front foot. This is the body position that we are on in a track start is a split squat stance, right? And I mean, maybe we don't do split squats in the gym necessarily, but we do squats, we do deads, and we do cleans and such, right? We train a movement under resistance weight. We want to, it's two sides of the same coin, right? We don't just want to do movements in the gym that simulate the movements we do in sport. When we're in sport, we want to do movements that simulate the things that we do in the gym. We want to make those things one. When you're doing a split squat stance, you're not doing it with your back foot so deeply in line with your front foot, right? We are almost, it's fine to take a narrow stance, not doing shoulder widths. Swimmers are also pretty predisposed to having very wide shoulders, but hip width, right? Getting the ball and socket that is in your hip directly over, your ankle. That's a pretty good stance to be in, right? And then getting that back leg straight back from that position. It's a bit more in line with the pushing motions that we train for in the gym. And again, under resistance, right? Now we have no resistance, so we're a free bird. But we don't want to then hamstring ourselves by putting our body into a position we don't train for, that isn't optimal, that we don't do under resistance, that's weaker, right? Get that back foot out to the side a bit more, get this front foot maybe out to the side a little bit more to help even you out so that you're still center over the block, but something to consider, something to play around with, right? It's never a bad idea to play with, what is too wide of a stance on a block, right? It's never bad to play with any technique, so long as you're playing with it and you're not just doing something by rote or especially by unanalyzed feel. But let's see what fires first. Getting down, so take your mark as occurred. I bet you were going to see Gael pan right at the go. Hard to see your back leg, so let's see if we can't see anything in the initial reaction. I believe go has occurred and you actually are shrugging a little bit. Yeah, boom. So we are now into the shrug. You shrugged a couple of frames earlier. Hard to tell what's firing first in this video, so sorry. But, I'll just say it. We want the first motion to be the back of the leg, the rear leg firing and pushing off first. That could have been happening. We're literally blocked in this. If you're shrugging after that back leg is firing, or at least in the same frame that back leg is firing, I don't care. But what we don't want to have happen is, a lat pull, a shoulder, like a delt pull occurring, and then the back leg firing, because all those frames we're spending shrugging without pushing is frames and time that we are reacting to go, but not going, right? We want to react to go by going, and everything else can, we have time in the air. If we need to get our body into some given position, let's do it when we've already jumped off the block. But I'm kind of inclined, watching that in half speed, to say that you might be shrugging instead of pushing that back leg first. So something to consider. That back leg, you see how fast it's traveling up? Again, this is not the best perspective. Nothing to be done about that, but we can see that it's going up pretty fast there, okay? I'd rather maybe see some press back and almost down rather than it skipping up, because it looks to me like there's energy that you're pushing up into nothingness versus you could have been driving that back wedge off its rails into this poor official's face. Like, we want to break the block every time we dive, okay? But good extension. That front leg, we can see the same thing is happening. It's like slipping up almost. So I'd almost want you to be, breaking the block off its rocker. Hands look like a little bit of a cross on the hand. Doesn't look quite as tight a streamline entry as we could be looking for as much as we want, right? We want the smallest possible surface area to be impacting the water at all times, because any surface area is drag, and drag is slow. So, we're going from a light medium, that is the air, to a denser medium, which is the water, and it's significantly denser than air. It's a brake. It's a hydro brake that we've got going on. The head might be low, but again, can't really tell from this perspective, so let's ignore that. Besides that, though, dude, the smoothness of the entry itself looks pretty darn smooth. So, some things to clean up for sure. But if we do, check that out. We're definitely not landing with our fingers, our hands together as good as you can, right? But the dive, good. The entry, good. We got things to clean up on the start, okay? This, I can see water in between your fingers. I don't necessarily know what you're specifically doing. I'm really hoping that you're not interlacing your fingers on one hand and the other hand is out, because that would mean you're extending the maximum amount of surface area that's impacting. Check out Liam. The surface area, that's pixels on my screen. Like a couple, 1 or 2 pixels on my screen. Just the tip of my mouse is his first point of contact. Think about a boat. You are a boat in the water. Everyone's a boat in the water, okay? When a boat on the surface of the water is impacting the water, moving forward, it creates a bow wave. We do the exact same thing in the water. It's more obvious when we are on the surface, but it's happening underwater too. It's a reason why we like 3-meter pools, because the bow wave propagating downward doesn't have enough energy to reflect off of a deep pool like this and hit us back up in the face, right? We're not swimming fast enough. We're not big enough as humans to have that bow wave be in effect in this deep of water. It's why pools get made this way. But part of that, philosophy and that reality is that Liam is breaking this water in front of him, and it is the high pressure environment that he's creating with this tiny surface area. Any liquid that is encountering a high pressure environment is going to slip to a low pressure environment. The low pressure environment is on the sides and above and below him. So bow wave that he's propagating right now is pushing water around him. Okay, he's not running into a brick wall here. He's running into water, and the water is getting out of his way. But that requires energy, right? And the energy is kinetic energy at this point, right? And he's developed that kinetic energy by pushing off the wall and diving and getting some kicks in. You're doing the exact same stuff, right? But because his surface area, that tip, is smaller than all this surface area that you are hitting the water with, you are requiring so much more force to move as fast as he is. Maybe you guys are moving basically the same speed right now. But guess what? it's not just that like you require more force, it's that you would have required more force to remain competitive with him in this moment, right? You continue, if you're going to continue to require more force than he does. So he's taking the easy way out. We want to do that. He's finding the path of least resistance. You're just not right now. You're finding a path of higher resistance. Okay, so get those fingertips together. Bit more hand motion, bit more upper body motion than I'd like on an underwater. You know, this perspective is hard because we're right on top of you. We might be seeing something that if you were out here over, you know, more in profile, that we wouldn't just be seeing. You know, there is also an element where you're watching your body, you know, move underwater, and water, of course, distorts light. So we are seeing, you know, refraction occur. You know, and critically, as we get closer to the surface, the bow wave begins to disrupt the surface of the water. You know, and that distorts the image. But it looks like it's too much up and down motion. When we're talking about streamline, we define an upper body as rib cage up, you know, the floating ribs, or, you know, the rib that isn't floating, the rib above your floating rib. You know, that's your upper body versus your lower body. We want a bit more stable, maybe. Let's watch this in half speed all the way through the breakout. Honestly, I kind of like the breakout. Maybe you're coming up a little too vertical. Coming up. But honestly, it looks pretty darn good. You know, here's the fun thing, right? I may have just spent, you know, like 8 minutes talking about, you know, the first 2 seconds of your stroke or something. But, like, you're winning the race at 15 meters, you know, or, you know, maybe Albert has you by a wrist. Right? I can complain about so much of your start, and yet you are getting yourself into a winning position, a competitive position, despite everything I have to complain about. So, like, what does that mean? Am I full of it? Or, you know, or the alternative, which is that despite handicapping yourself, you're still in competition with these guys. I would, you know, I reserve the right to be full of it. But what I would say is that, you know, if you can clean up that start, you're going to be out here. And you're going to be even more competitive, right? So you're hamstringing yourself, and in spite of that, you're doing pretty well at the start here. Like, this is some low-hanging fruit that we can improve on, and we're going to see some real outcomes. Let's go to full speed. Sometimes half speed sucks for watching things. Some big breaths going on here. Also, something to note now, you have, I think, yeah, gone from the center of the lane to the left of the lane. It's 100 meters. You know, it's not as bad as if it was 50 meters, but you are traveling more distance than everybody else is that's not going to the side of their lane. And, you know, everybody else has a 50-meter pool length, and, you know, what you've done is you've traveled the hypotenuse of, you know, whatever this width time, you know, and by a 50-meter, whatever that, you know, third line on the triangle is, you know, that's your length, and we know that that's longer than just the straight up and down of the triangle. So you've traveled that distance. I'm not going to do the math. I'll do that after this video, just for my own curiosity's sake. So that I have that number in the future. But you've moved over 1.5 feet, maybe 2 feet. You've added some distance to the race. Okay, let's not make a longer race than we have to. If we were allowed to cheat, we would cheat, and we'd swim 49 meters instead of 50 meters per length. You've done the opposite. You've decided to swim 50 plus meters while everyone else is swimming 50 meters. So again, hamstringing yourself. And arguably a pretty easy fix, right? So we love easy fixes. Again, I'm liking that breakout. What I don't like, and if you listen to enough of these recordings, you're going to hear me say this ad nauseum, but first 3 strokes should be establishing strokes after a breakout. Set your pace, set your hold, set your stroke, set everything up, set your velocity, and then get a breath in. Breathing, no matter how efficient it is an inefficiency. And breathing on your first stroke is starting with an inefficiency. A lot of breathing going on throughout this entire second 50. I'm hoping that you stop about now. You can see how asymmetric your freestyle looks because of that breath, right? It's every time you're on your side, you're right. 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Not only that, we can see that our stroke is longer here. And it's gonna just look at the length that it shortens down to from here basically on out. It's already starting to shorten up, and it gets really short, and now it's really short. Now maybe you're dying, right? Absolutely fine in that sense, right? Like at least you're giving it. But when we're dying, we want to try and preserve the best possible things in our stroke, and the best possible things in our stroke are our length of stroke and our hold in the water, because if we let our stroke shorten and we let our hold go away, then any work we're doing, any turnover that we're creating is doing a minimum of work. So I would encourage you to, in sets, when you're getting to the point where you're dying or you're feeling a die come on in practice, right? Drive and fight to maintain length of stroke and hold on the water. Overall, I honestly liked a lot of that race though, dude. Let me see the finish before we move on totally. But I like a lot of the race. I think that there's a lot there that you can work on, and I think you're going to see some really nice improvements if you work on those, including the finish here. So we can see that you're pretty much flat in the water, shoulder and shoulder at the same depth. Means you're flat. Means that you're not reaching out as far as you possibly can. I would suggest considering that right arm be your last stroke, not this left arm, because you're landing on your left arm not fully extended. You're landing short, right? You can reach farther than this. If your shoulders are farther away than they are to the wall, you could still, with this arm, reach and touch the wall. We're very far back now, so sorry, we're going to just do half speed coming into the wall. I think we have 2 more cycles. Yeah, this maybe should have been your last stroke. And so long as you would be driving forward in a near one-armed streamlined position, or rather an exact one-armed streamlined position, it doesn't help that the context of this race, the finish of this race, is that we just highlighted that you were slowing down. But theoretically, if you weren't slowing down, if you were traveling at whatever velocity you're traveling at, driving into the wall, right? A glide is going to preserve speed over distance better than taking a tiny stroke and then landing on a short stroke. A glide is not just like going to infinitely preserve velocity, so a glide is too long when we glide and we experience a slowdown. But a lot of people experience a slowdown in a glide because they glide with heads up. It's not your problem here, but it's something to play around with, right? Get into the habit. Even in the next couple of weeks, I don't feel bad about telling you this at this time of the year, but in practice, every time that you are finishing, no matter what effort, and I mean that as in like when you are traveling at 1 out of 10 effort, it's warm down or it's like the first 25 of warm up. You are just getting in the water. You are just hating how cold it is outside and how cold the water is. Touch the wall in full extension. Form that good habit. Practice that good habit. Because it's very hard in a moment of crisis or a moment of high pressure like a race to then suddenly consciously do something that is not your habit. If you spend all of practice doing finishes that are really open and really slow and really flat and not reaching and stretching, you're going to get really good at not doing touches that are good. So a lot of work on. A lot of it is in the edges of the race, so we love that because it's a lot of decision making that has to happen rather than anything like practical or strength related or stamina related. Great race. If you can implement even just 1 or 2 of these things, though, I think you're going to be really happy with the result. Coming over to Liam. It is the start of the race. Yes. Set. I'm expecting that that front leg is pretty tall. We've talked about this. That back leg is flying into space. Right now, you're flying into space, to be fair, but, you know, are you flying too high? I would maybe argue that, because look at how fast you're coming down. Right? You're kind of splashing into the water. So I'm always going to advocate for a good arc, but you want to start your arc lower. You are approaching more of a V in the water, or rather the air. You're up and then you're down, rather than out, up, and down. You want to be a rainbow, not a mountain. I want to avoid that little fall. We can see our hips coming straight down. Not the best angle to be seeing this. I'd rather see it in profile, but that foot going straight to the ceiling rather than, like, yeah, the foot's going to raise, but I want to see more drive through the back of that wedge. Something to maybe consider. You start kicking right away. Fastest body position is streamline. Sans kick. As soon as we start kicking, it needs to be that the equation of my added effort is overcoming the increased body plan, the layout of impacting the water. Like, your kick needs to be worth the squeeze. Now, the water is a bad medium to be moving through, and so yeah, kicking underwater is good. But here's the thing, right? The fastest we're ever moving in any race is the dive. The second fastest we're moving in any race is the underwater after the dive. Third fastest underwater after a wall. Fourth fastest the swim, or it should be. Those last two sometimes get switched up, but by people that are not good at underwater usually. You know, myself included. You might want to pause a little bit before getting into your kick, because you're traveling at really high speed coming off of the blocks, and it's like, if we could not kick for just a fraction of a second, we're probably not going to be wasting energy, and as a result getting if you can preserve speed entering the water at high velocity by not kicking, let's do that. Let's not waste energy and be kicking to preserve speed that we'd be having anyways. I'm talking about a fraction of a second. It certainly shouldn't be like a second. We don't want to be in a mode of gliding or something. But that looked like very fast into the kick. You almost land and are kicking, right? I think you can maybe delay a little bit. Common thread with you. Very, very short underwater. You're the first to break out. We can't see whoever is, underneath in the other lane here, but I wouldn't be surprised if you're ahead of them on the breakout. Underwater can be fast. Yes, we are in a fight of, if my underwater is slow, I don't preserve my underwater. I get to the thing I'm fast at, but I do believe that you are capable of going farther underwater at speed. Good opening strokes, good establishing strokes. Let's go up to full speed. First breath, very tight, very nice. You're looking easy, dude. Second breath was a bit slower. Third breath looked pretty tight to me. Fourth breath, maybe a fifth breath there, maybe a sixth breath. I think that was a breath. Let's not do those 3 breaths coming into the wall there, right? I'm happy with maybe that breath that was happening here, but those other 2 breaths, let's cut that out. Hitting the wall, I think first, it's definitely between you and Albert. You guys can look at your paces and splits and see who actually beat whoever to the wall. Again, first to the surface, but you were also first to the wall, so it expects. But Albert is underwater still. I think you're capable of preserving the underwater. Even a meter longer would be an advantage to you. Again, so long as it can be at speed. I just think that you're capable. I'd love to see a move be made here where you start increasing speed. This is what I was talking about briefly. I know that you know about this, but you had issue with your arm being way out. Your arm is in now. That is a weak body position to be in. right arm, we can even tell from the wrong side that it's not doing the same thing. But your left arm, I'd bet your weak arm coming into a weaker position. Let's see what happens. I'd love to see no breathing for the rest of this race. I'd love to have seen no breathing extended longer. It looks like you're not going to breathe. But I think that finish could use improvement. Because how long you are, like, does this other stroke get to even complete? Because you have to, like, your other stroke is like here, right? You don't complete the full stroke. Maybe a glide was the option on that second last stroke. That other stroke, like, you're just spending. I mean, it's not egregious. Maybe the right call. Hard to sometimes tell with these non-profile views. But I think you get out-touched. If you had glided instead of taking, right, because there's, yeah, you do get out, I think you get double out-touched. Yeah, right. Like, you would have been better served by having that left arm be your potential point of contact. Now you're, you know, ideally you glide, 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 and that's where your touch occurs, right? Like, we want to be closer to the wall when we are reaching for it. So you know, like that's a problem, and I don't have an answer for you other than, like, yeah, we were out of position. This is not a good place to be based on how long you are and where we are in our stroke cycle. You want to be a little closer so that that stroke can barely glide and touch, right? Barely. Inches, a hand length of glide and then touch. But even if you glided here and you were prepared to glide here, this guy probably beats you because he's ahead. But this guy wouldn't have beaten you by, like, there's maybe touch there and maybe touch there. Geez, I don't know. You do get that other arm around pretty darn fast. I think that's his touch, though. And we're waiting on those. You're moving that arm very fast to get that finish, right? We're shooting at 60 frames per second here. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 1, 2, 3. I mean, so it's like 0.4 to get that arm around, I'm expecting. So kind of actually, you know, in realm of what we would expect. I think if you had like an extra drive on that left arm, it might have been the answer. But overall, pretty good, dude. I think there's things we can clean up definitely, and I don't say it lightly. I think like the wall and the dive, like the entry off the dive, are where you can see some major improvements coming from. Right, you got to the wall first at the 50. You know, I kind of want to maybe take a look at this second 50 at full speed before we move over. You do look long, strong, and easy, but I'm expecting that left arm doing the crossover means that you're not as efficient as you could be. You're not using the strength that you could use. All right, slip, slip. You're only getting, you know, what you can out of half of your strokes. Big breaths there, big breaths there. At least that was your last breath, right? But 4 breaths right in the middle of the length that were all slowing you down, right? I want to get head down and driving for the wall, but I don't want it to be at the sacrifice of velocity. Overall, good race. Coming over to the next swimmer, Ben. Where are we? Lane 6? Yeah, okay. Let's get to the take our marks. We're in profile now. We can see better position. This is either a very fast take your marks go. I mean, it appears like it's a very fast take your marks go, but this is important. I don't think you stop moving on the blocks, dude. I don't see a frame where you I mean, maybe there's a couple frames in there where you stabilize back here. Okay, so more than a couple, but, you know, let's look at this. He's stable for the whole thing. Set, stable, 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 go. Now you are getting that back leg back, but you're also you're coiling and then going. Nice, but I'd rather settle into a stable position. You don't technically know, it's just a problem, right? Theoretically, if we knew when the person was going to say go, we wouldn't actually want to stop in motion. We would want to coil back and then and then explode off, right? Coil the spring, fire. No stoppage. We don't have that luxury of knowing that they're going to say go at any given moment. We also don't know if, the race is going to get called off, delayed, right? We don't want to be the person that dives into the water, and I feel like being the person that is unstable on the blocks, right, constantly in motion, basically, that's the instability. I don't want you to be in a position where you're expecting them to say go necessarily. You should be expecting them to hopefully say, go. But, so get a little bit more stable on the blocks. But let's see what happens first. I think you could maybe stand to be a bit farther out. It does look like there you are firing that back leg first. Let's see what moves first here. Dial's really panning right, so we could see that your heel drops because you're pressing. So good. Back leg's firing first. Good extension, good extension. Oh, come on, keep working. There we go, good. Pretty good entry. Nice. I'd say your next goal for your underwaters, or your dives rather, is to try and have that exact dive. But farther. Kind of small on the kick. And you see how you're really lifting the water out of the water, right? You're very flat, and then we can see that bump. We can see you disturb the water with your bow wave. And you lift that water off of your back rather than slide out from under it. Water weighs a decent amount, right? We don't want to do any more work than we have to. Further back than that, sorry. Okay. Great breakout, though. I really like that. You look like you're doing really well here. Very easy, huge kick. Just absolutely massive. You're eating this field up. Fast breathing. Hopefully a little bit of a slowdown there. You see that? Sorry, let me play. There we go. Okay, that's harder to see, but look at how fast you look like you're moving. And that breath. And you also shorten up coming into that turn, eh? Like, check out the... Now, okay, disclaimer, right? This perspective, a lot of things get lost through a camera at this distance. The swimmer is swimming away from us. A lot of things go wrong with the image, essentially. It's hard to tell what's occurring. You expect, it looks like you shorten up. Not you specifically, but anyone looks like they're shortening up from this angle. But I think you look like you're really shortening up here. I'd rather you remain long. Those last 5 meters, I want to look like these 5 meters. I just want you to be able to hit this stroke into a flip. Let's see what happens after the turn. I like the break. Breathing in the first handful of strokes, first couple of strokes after the breakout. We want the breakout to be establishment. I think that's a breath. Kind of hard to tell. I think that's also a breath. I think that's also a breath. So your first 3 strokes are breathing strokes, or I think they're breathing strokes by the looks of things. And breathing is an obstruction. It gets in our way, right? If we could choose not to breathe, we would choose not to breathe. So you've decided, in essence, to take 3 strokes that are less efficient than the stroking that you are capable of. I would rather you, if you have to do 3 strokes in a row, where you're breathing, I'd rather you do 3 strokes in a row where you're not breathing and then get that air. And even if it was like a 4th breath that you had to tack on to make up for it, then like I guess fine, right? But set your pace, set your hold, set your stroke in 3, quote unquote perfect, or as perfect as we can make it, strokes, and then deal with breathing. You're just powering it though. Really like this. Looking strong. Maybe a little bit of a slowdown. The breathing is... So great finish on that. That's pretty close to perfect. Maybe just a little bit farther away from the wall by the time that hand is coming down, so that you get just, like a hand's length of glide or something like that. Because glide is fast. If we're traveling fast and we can get into a near streamline position, like, it is good. It preserves momentum and speed. But that's pretty darn good. That's pretty darn perfect spacing. If you were just back a little bit farther and you got that entry and finish, just a little bit of a glide, it's not even worth saying like, oh, you should have done that or something. Like, that's a good finish. If you do that if that's how you finished every race, like, no one would be allowed to complain at you about how you finish races. But here's the thing. You make a move at the end of the race in the last 5 meters by not breathing anymore. Let's make that move earlier. Be in a position where coming in here, right, moves take a long time to have outcomes, right? Now, if it's a move like deciding not to breathe, there's kind of a 2-stage advantage to making that move. On one hand, breathing is inefficient, so, okay, I'm not breathing anymore. So instantly, as in like immediately, the next stroke that you don't breathe on, it's better than the last stroke that you did breathe on. So, it's a good move for a reason. You get instant reward. Moves like where you increase your stroke rate or you like increase your power and stuff, right? Moving through the water and actually generating a higher velocity, like, that takes time to move over. But here's the thing, when we stop breathing and we gain that efficiency, we are allowing for a potentially higher velocity to occur, but it takes time and distance for that velocity to actually come about, because we are moving slow. Fastest swimmers in the world are like swimming a little bit, around, a brisk walk, somebody on deck. So any move we make takes time and distance to occur. If you stopped breathing here, by the time we get to those last 5 meters, by the time we get to 7.5 meters or something, you would be moving faster. As it stands, you make that move here, and yes, you get that immediate benefit that every stroke into the wall is more efficient than the 5 meters prior, and as a result, you are not wasting time. As a result, you're traveling in those 5 meters probably faster than the 5 meters prior. But if you extended that move, you would also gain from like the progressive velocity increase of not breathing in strokes. But I'm gassed for oxygen. I'm feeling that lactic acid. If you're feeling lactic acid and you're gassed for oxygen, like, guess what? Breathing here isn't going to help you get better. Not in the race. It's going to make you hurt more in the future post-race by not breathing here, but we want to take that. We want to take that fight, right? Like, who cares about you in 20 seconds from now? We care about you right now, and we care about you in the next 5 seconds. Hurt you right now, right? Go faster. Don't breathe. And then, future you can worry about, how badly you're feeling because you decided to get your head down and hold your breath coming in. You have a great way to finish this race, right? The last 25 meters of this race are awesome. Last 35 meters. The whole race is good. Really liked it, dude. You're looking efficient, looking strong, looking long and easy, basically the entire way. I think we have some nice things to work on that you're going to see improvement occur in. Even when you get your head down here and you're not breathing, it's just great. So, awesome. Okay, over to you, Albert. Coming to the start of the race. Line 7, good body position. I like how you settle on the blocks. that little dip that we've been seeing, rather than firing that back leg first, you're reacting, and now you're beginning the press, right? So you've got a good reaction time, but instead of going out, you're going down. But good extension. Pretty good entry. We're still looking for a bit more of that smoother arc into the water rather than this flop occurring. So a higher angle of attack, a higher angle of entry. You know, our angle of entry is, you know, the flat of the surface, and then the angle of our body, right? And, you know, critically, here's the thing: you're bent. We should be bent. We shouldn't be ramrod straight. But ideally, we're more of an arc, a soft arch, rather than having a, you know, kind of a bit more of an angle to ourselves. But it's this angle, and it's also that angle that we're talking about. So what is this? It's a sub 45 degrees. I don't know what specifically, but, you know, that's our angle of entry. And as a result, we get flop. Let's look at Ben and his angle of entry. It's way higher than yours, right? It's approaching the same angle that like your hands and your arms are at, but his whole body is on that angle. Your angle is much smaller across the average of your body that it's creating. His entry is smoother than your entry. So that's what I mean by like let's work toward a higher angle of attack. I like the decision to reach for so far, and great first stroke. You are maybe winning the race at this point, but I'm just not seeing the hole in the water that I want to see. You're getting your arms moving, but you're pushing them through and around the water maybe more than I'd like. Let's see that turn again. Maybe shortening up even more in the last 5 meters. Like, it's hard to tell from this perspective, but it looks like maybe a little bit short coming into the flags. Another, you know, theoretically good decision. You really worked on maintaining that your underwater was going to let go, right? But maybe it was a little too long underwater. Maybe you wasted some time by sticking with the idea of like, I'm going to do a long underwater, but you allowed yourself to slow down when maybe hitting the surface earlier. Although, you know what? Doesn't kind of look like it from super slow-mo. So what happens if we look at it again from full speed? It looks like you take a long time to push off the wall. Like, I would expect you to be coming out off of that wall a lot sooner. Like, look, you beat Ben, and yet you're both pushing off at the same time. So something crazy happened there, right? Breath right off the breakout. Don't think you did that on the first breakout. Maybe that was 2 breaths, 3 breaths in a row. That didn't look quite like a breath, but let's try and make sure that our opening 3 strokes of every length are establishing, right? And breathing is an obstruction to our regular stroke. We don't want to be establishing our stroke with an obstruction. An obstruction is going to slow us down. It's easier to start at 100% potential velocity and go to 0 than it is to start at 0 potential velocity and go to 100% potential velocity, right? It's easier to stop than it is to start and work up. If we start at a lower velocity and over distance and time, you know, have to maintain a plateau or even fight to increase velocity, that's a bad fight to be in. That is an uphill fight. And the more likely thing that's going to happen regardless is that you're going to start at whatever velocity. You might plateau for a little bit, but you're going to go down over time and distance and effort. So let's start at a higher velocity and, again, fight for the plateau. But, you know, like, yeah, we're going to probably, if anything, slow down over time and distance and fatigue. But if we start higher, we end higher. If we start lower, we're going to end lower. So let's get those first 3 strokes into check. Start at a higher velocity. Pushing off the wall harder and faster is going to help with that. You can see that, for how big you are, your stroke just isn't, that one was good, but your right arm is coming in right on top of your head, right? Versus your left arm, you're getting reach, and then it's short. And you're just not traveling as much per stroke as I know you're capable of, that I've seen you do. But good finish. That's appropriate. That was a good reach and glide. So the finish is good, but we got to work on getting your hold to where it can be for when you're trying to operate at speed. All right, and let's come over to Misha. At the start of the race, come on, let's go. There we go. Okay. Set. Maybe that front leg is a bit straight. I think we've talked about that though. What is happening there first? That's hard to tell. Looking for the first reaction. I think it's more of that shoulder shrug. I think it's a lat pull rather than a back leg press. We want the back leg press to be the first thing that we're doing, right? It only looks like you're pressing now. So even though that shrug is like, okay, now I'm going, right? I'm reacting to the time. And, it doesn't matter that no one else is off the blocks. If you have the reaction time to have your body tense and stuff after the go, but it's not that back leg driving you, this is great, because then imagine how much faster you're getting off the blocks if your first reaction is to get off the blocks rather than do a shrug. Pretty good extension. Little odd entry there, right? It almost looks like you open your ribs up. Yeah, we can see that you're almost on a step down at the rib, right? There's this line, and then there's this parallel line that is just a step down lower. Try and get your trunk a little bit tighter, because I think your angle of attack is pretty good, but little maybe late on that breakout, right? You get almost to the surface and then you take your stroke. We can see you're disrupting. There's a bow wave around you, right? We can see you're disrupting the water. We can see the light reflecting back into the camera lens on angles that it wasn't just before. So you're disrupting the water. You're that close to the surface, and both hands are still up, and your head is breaking. It's maybe not breaking, but right, our head is above the surface of the average water level. You've still got a bow wave over your head, but now your arm is pulling. So maybe just a little earlier. First 3 strokes, let's make those establishing strokes, because we've got that breath going on. I'd like the first 3 establishing strokes to be non-breathing strokes. Breathing strokes are slower than non-breathing strokes, and breathing is an obstruction to our velocity and speed and our stroke itself. If we could choose not to breathe, we wouldn't breathe. We gotta breathe in 100. Otherwise, our body's natural systems can't supply. On average, the average person or the average athlete can't supply us for long enough, or it's just on the edge for the 50 seconds that we're going to be doing this 100, but it's just not worth getting into that fight. Gotta breathe at some point. Gotta breathe enough to preserve ourselves for the 100, but let's just not do it in the first 3 strokes. Let's do it after that at least. Good kick. Very easy long stroke. A lot of breathing. I hope this breathing stops. No, doesn't stop. Let's not breathe inside the flags, and ideally let's not breathe inside of the 7 meters, okay? Again, breathing strokes disrupt us, and we want to be hitting the wall at highest potential speed, basically, right? We don't want to slow down into the wall. At younger ages, a lot of people slow down coming into the wall. and it's an advantage to whoever is able to not slow down into the wall. And that's honestly a big place where you see age group swimmers suddenly drop time, is they figure out to not slow down into the wall. They figure out how to not be taking breaths inside the flags or approaching the flags. It's still present on the university level. It's still present at the national level. And amazingly, it's still present on the international level. But it's an easy fix. It comes from a choice rather than some natural aptitude or ability. A little short on the underwater, right? I mean, like everyone here is kind of like, that's been my recurring note in this video. Albert's underwater is longer, and he's maintaining speed and power to the breakout, and he's getting you a little bit on the distance there. You know, he had a crazy slow flip, but like because of his underwater, he's able to still get ahead of you there, right? Ben caught him because of the flip. Ben would have been farther back if Albert had flipped sooner, but try and do the underwater a little bit longer, so long as you can maintain speed. Let's get back up to full speed here. Really liking how long that's looking, Misha. I'd love to see less breathing going on in the 100 regardless. And especially in the last, and we can see, like, you make, a decision that, okay, it's the end of 100, I'm not going to breathe anymore for the last, 3 strokes. Make that call, make that move happen earlier in the 100. Make that happen back here, okay? If you listen to this whole long video, you're going to hear me say it, I think, a couple times. But there's two advantages when we decide to not breathe. One happens instantly, because by deciding not to breathe, we have a more efficient stroke, so we get to reap the benefits instantly. Our stroke will be faster, our stroke will be better, it will be more powerful. Great. So by not breathing, we instantly get a +1 against anyone who also, well, or rather not who also is breathing, but whoever is breathing and we're not, we have an advantage on them. 2, increasing velocity, increasing speed, has to take time in swimming. It's very hard to instantly increase speed, and if you're able to instantly increase speed noticeably, what were you doing before? It's really easy to be going at 50% energy and then suddenly take a stroke that's faster, and the rest of them are all fast. But even then, right? Go do a even a short course, 25. Do the first 2 strokes super slow, 1 or 3 out of 10 effort, and then do the next 10 strokes ultra fast as you can go. Try and build up to maximum race speed. It takes time and distance to do that, right? And you're starting at the lowest potential. It still takes time to go up in speed. We're already traveling at relatively good speed, but to even go a little bit faster, it will still take time for that effect to come out. If we stop breathing sooner, we get more meters of the race at that higher velocity. You get, by not breathing in the last 5 meters, the last 4 strokes or 3 strokes or whatever, you instantly get a little bit more efficiency. But let's, triple that efficiency of not breathing. Instead of it just being here, let's not be breathing here and gain all of that efficiency that comes from not breathing. And then let's also gain, 2/3 of that distance of literally moving faster than we would if we were breathing, because those first 5 meters of non-breathing, our velocity is traveling up because of the efficiency, okay? And then we get to be operating at that high speed coming into the finish. It hurts and it sucks, but let that be a future you problem. Don't worry about that now, right? You right now should be worrying about traveling the fastest you possibly can to finish the race. And, sucks to be you in 20 seconds from now when you made that decision, and 20 seconds from you is in a lot of pain. But, that's what it sometimes takes. Great swim, though, overall. Maybe a little bit tight on the finish. I think that should have been your last stroke. But we know that this last stroke comes. You're too close to the wall to be taking that last stroke there. You could have, at the velocity you're swimming, look how close you are to the wall. Like, it would take nothing to glide in from here. And here's the thing, like, as long as you are gliding in with a tight one-arm streamline, like, you will be traveling at the same speed. Like, you don't have enough room to have a die-off on speed that's going to affect you. What you do have room to do at this distance to the wall is start with that arm that should be touching first, take it away from the wall so that you can get this extra half little super fast recovered stroke to the wall a whole cycle later, you know? So trust the glide a little bit, but great swim overall.